First, I want to talk about report parameters. A report parameter is a parameter defined to allow a value to be passed to the report at runtime. Hopefully that's clear at this point. Now, report parameters are often, but not exclusively, mapped to dataset parameters. But you can see all of the parameters for a report here within the parameters section of the report data window. So these are all the parameters for this product sales unbound report. And if you double click on a parameter, you can open up the Report Parameter Properties dialog box here. This is where you can adjust the name, user prompt text, data type, and various other attributes of a report parameter. So here in the General tab, it includes a name. This is the name of the parameter. And by default, this is the same name as the query parameter if it's a dataset parameter, minus the leading @ sign. And then you can also specify a prompt. This is the prompt text that's displayed to the user when the report executes. By default, it's the same as name, but you can enter anything that you want here, any kind of information to clarify what the user should enter. Then the data type is the type of the parameter, and as you can see, you have the choices of text, which is the default, Boolean, date time, integer, and float. And it's good to specify the type of the parameter if it's not in fact text, because then at runtime, the report is able to help the user enter a valid value. Then there's an allow blank value here. This isn't disabled because I have date time selected, but you can check this if you want to allow blank values to be passed to the query. Similarly, you can allow null values. And then there's an interesting option here, I'm not going to talk about this much here, where you can allow multiple values. In this case, the user is able to make multiple selections, such as multiple countries, multiple dates even, and so forth. And then you can also select the parameter visibility. This affects how the parameter is displayed to the user. Visible displays a parameter prompt to the user, so that's the default. Hidden hides the report parameter from the user. And in this case, the report parameter can still be set using a default value on the report URL or within a subscription. So this is one way of hooking into how a report is delivered to the user. And then there's an internal option here that hides the report parameter and disables its use on the report URL or in a subscription. The only way this parameter can be set is using a default value. All right, then the next page here is available values. So this is where you can specify the available values that the user can select from. The default is none, and that just displays a text box or some other data type specific kind of input, such as true, false radio buttons for a Boolean. Or you can specify values, and you can create a list of values that are available. And then you can also execute a query, and this is probably the option that you use most often, where you actually hit the database in order to get the values that are available within a drop-down list box. All right, then here's the page. I'm going to put that back to none. Here's the page where you can set the default value. And similar sort of options here, no default value. Or you can specify values. You can specify multiple values, assuming that the parameter allows multiple values. And then you can also get values from a query. All right, then there's an advanced page here. And one option is allows you to refresh the data when the parameter changes. This refers to how reporting services handles the retrieval of default parameter values for cascading parameters. So you can select to automatically refresh it in order to have reporting services determine when to refresh the parameter's default values. Or you can always refresh or never refresh. And then there's also this option here that allows the report to notify you when the report part is updated on the server. So if the author of a report part on the server changes how the parameter is used, the next time you come into Design View with this, you can be notified and make any adjustments within the report. All right, so as you see, there's a lot of different options that you can set for different parameters. All right, so those are report parameters, and remember that they can be both unbound and bound to a data set. Now I want to talk about dataset parameters. A dataset parameter, or what's sometimes called a query parameter, is a parameter that the dataset's query is expecting to be passed to it at runtime in order for it to execute. And you can define dataset parameters either in stored procedures or in ad hoc SQL. Now, when you create a dataset based on a stored procedure or a parameterized SQL statement that uses parameters, then the report designer automatically creates a report parameter for each query parameter, and it names it the same as the name of the parameter in the stored procedure or within the ad hoc query. Now, to view these parameters, you can come over here to Datasets and double-click on that to open up the dataset properties and go to the parameters page here. And here you can see and change how the parameter for the query or stored procedure is mapped to a parameter value. Now, for the most part, you'll probably just want to let Report Designer automatically create these parameters and map them to report parameters. But if you later add, delete, rename, or change the type of a stored procedure or query parameter, the Report Designer doesn't automatically fix up the parameter mappings. So you have two choices to remedy the situation. Fix up the parameter mappings manually, or delete and recreate the dataset. And if you delete and recreate it, then Report Designer will automatically recreate these for you. And depending on the change that you made, you may also need to use the Report Parameter dialog box to make changes to the report parameters. That section back up in here. Okay, so those are dataset parameters. One nice option that you have too is to reorder the report parameters. Report parameters are displayed to the user in the order in which they're listed here within this parameters folder. And if the report contains multiple datasets with parameters, each dataset's parameters are mapped in the order in which you created the database by default. So that's what happens as you create the report. But you can determine the current order of parameter prompts by using this list here within the parameters folder. So if I select end date here, notice that when I selected it, the move up and move down arrows are enabled, and I can decide to move that down, or move it back up, move it all the way to the top, move it back down. Notice that when it goes to the top, this arrow is now disabled because it's at the top, it can't be moved up anymore. And when it goes to the bottom, that arrow is disabled. And I want to emphasize here that this default order in the report as I created it, it's purely coincidental that these are in alphabetical order. They were actually created first by the data set, and they happen to be within the query in begin date, end date order. And then I later came in and added the unbound parameter here that happened to be in alphabetical order. So that's just coincidence that those are in that order. Now, it's important to understand that the ordering of the parameters affects only the order in which the user is prompted for the parameter values. It doesn't affect how they're used in the report in any way.